Imagine this, a man producing a documentary about his fraternity brother's prostate cancer journey, only to find out along the way that he too has prostate cancer. Yeah, I know it sounds a lot like the Twilight Zone and probably not a whole lot like Rod Sterling, but that actually happened to me. And let me tell you, when you hear these words from your urologist after a biopsy,
So we have a confirmation with a second opinion that he definitely has prostate cancer. Now, what we're going to do briefly now is to go over what this shows and what it means.
it goes from surreal experience to a very scary one in a matter of minutes. Some would say seconds. But I hope after listening and subscribing to this podcast that a prostate cancer diagnosis, though serious, does not mean a death sentence. I'm Reggie Hicks, producer of the documentary and outreach project If You Are My Brothers, and welcome to the first If You Are My Brothers podcast. This project started with my fraternity brother, Ralph C.T. Franklin, years ago, and Ralph shared his story with me and other members of my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Incorporated, and he was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of prostate cancer. He wanted the brothers of the fraternity to know what was going on with him, and he pretty much stated to us in an email, if you are my brothers, you'll get checked. Before I go into more of the story, let's hear Ralph in his own words.
I received a customary letter from the insurance company. I looked at the first line of that letter, and it says, we're rejecting your application for life insurance. See enclosed laboratory report. The laboratory report says abnormal PSA 100, probability of malignancy. When I saw probability of malignancy, immediately I knew what it meant, and it was like, what is going on? I had a biopsy. The doctor called me and told me that the result of the biopsy was positive for cancer. I then had to take additional exams. These scans of the body, scans of the bones, etc., for the specific purpose of seeing whether or not that cancer had metastasized. Me and my wife went back to the doctor. He told me that the cancer had metastasized and it was in my lymph nodes. My wife asked him, said, well, what does that mean in terms of life expectancy? He said, perhaps 2 years. After the doctor informed me of my prognosis, which was terminal illness, I said that I was not going to go out without at least informing my fraternity brothers as to what was happening with me. I was not going to be one of these people who would be ill, and the next thing is that the fraternity gets a call and say, guess what, your fraternity brother has died.
So you heard Ralph's story, and maybe you've just been diagnosed, or maybe you know somebody who has prostate cancer. Let me say this, first and foremost, that it's going to be okay. Good news is, if caught early, you have a high chance and a very good chance of being cured. But hey, don't take it from me. Take it from this gentleman.
We have achieved a 99% 5-year survival rate. I think if any cancer could be cured, prostate cancer could be one of the first one to be cured.
That was Dr. T-Ming Chu. I had the honor of interviewing him briefly a few years back. The most important thing to know about Dr. Chu is that he led the research team in the 1970s that resulted in the discovery of prostate-specific antigen, or PSA, and also the development of the PSA test. A lot of you probably are familiar with the PSA test. And I like to call him the father of PSA. Now, during this podcast, you'll see how PSA played an important part in Ralph and I's journey. But Ralph and I went through a lot. Biopsies and seed implants, radiation therapy, surgery, hormone therapy, clinical trials, blood transfusions. But through all of that, we also were connected by brotherhood. But this podcast is more about your journey. And you can expect in future episodes, we'll talk a lot about the innovations in research and treatment. Yeah, we'll talk to the docs. But one of the main things we really want to do with this podcast is to talk to you, to find out and talk to you about what to expect after treatment. From your first day back to years afterwards. We'll interview survivors and partners and family members. Yeah, there'll be the researchers and therapists and docs, but it really is about you. The one thing you are sure to get from this podcast is true transparency. People being real about their fears and challenges and triumphs and faith, courage. We'll talk about what happens when ED and incontinence becomes a side effect of your treatment. How does your partner handle all of these changes? How do you move forward with your life after treatment? Now, don't get me wrong. It's not all doom and gloom. And remember, everyone, and I do mean everyone, is different. But the one thing you will learn from this podcast is that regardless of the outcome, there are ways to cope, ways to correct, and more importantly, ways to live a normal life. And get this, at the end of the day, you will hear from me over and over again that it's about life, about living for your family. And what my wife has so accurately coined, it's life over libido. So stay tuned, because if you are my brothers, you're going to want to be a part of this podcast experience.